Hello and welcome to WNHH Radio's Dateline New Haven. I'm your host, Paul Bass, inviting you to look behind the headlines on the stories that make the Elm City tick. Well, John Cirillo has been making the Elm City tick for a long time, and he's proud to call himself a Republican, I think, still. And he's in the WNHH studio. Tell us about some of that, because those are kind of timely issues. So welcome to the show, Jonathan.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It is tougher and tougher to be considered a Republican and be a proud Republican.
But I know you, John Cirillo, your hero is Ronald Reagan. There's no one more Republican than Ronald Reagan. You have been an active member of the Republican Party for over a decade, right? For decades.
Mm-hmm.
You consider yourself a conservative.
Yeah.
But you've always been in the mix. In other words, you deal with people who aren't conservative and all sorts of things. You've been on the Civil Service Commission. You run for office. You've been a very good monitor of elections and fair. So you're like a civic guy who just happens to be conservative and a Republican.
Yeah, I think our democracy works best when you have multiple viewpoints of how to solve problems. And, not only one party has the right answer. So it's important for me to participate in the process and give an alternative perspective.
Well, right now, but you say it's kind of hard to call yourself a Republican today. Is it because Republicans are an endangered species? You're sort of the spotted owl in New Haven? Or is it because you have a psychopath Republican president at the moment?
I think that we have a president who really is not a Republican in the traditional sense. And
no question.
I consider him a parasite who has taken over the Republican Party in a large sense. You say Reagan was one of my heroes. I think about his speeches where he was talking about the United States being a shining city on a hill. And I feel like Donald Trump is putting a do not enter sign on the road to that city. Okay. And that hurts me. That's not our traditional values. It's not where
political parties have realignments from time to time. For instance, the Democratic Party until the 1960s was the party of segregation and limiting the rights of black people. The Republican Party for 100 years had been the party of civil rights. Even Richard Nixon, despite creating the Southern strategy of appealing to white working class people, had in fact been closer to the Martin Luther King family than John F. Kennedy was. And so we saw a shift there. We see all sorts of shifts. So the Republican Party, could one argue that Donald Trump, while moving the Republican Party to a new set of positions, also reflects a shift in the base of that party since the days of the Tea Party, where they were against an agenda often supported by bigger corporations, which included, easy immigration, fair immigration and rules, but, encouraging immigration is something that makes our country strong, including trade deals with foreign countries as long as they're struck well, including environmental conservation and climate concern, because that also was originally a Republican issue. The word conservative comes from conserve.
Mm-hmm.
So even before Donald Trump came on the scene, I think we would agree that Donald Trump personally has moved the needle, has led the change of the party, and there's a fight within the party. But could one argue on issues like the ones I just mentioned, Donald Trump did reflect where the base of the Republican Party has moved since you've been an adult?
Yeah, no, and it has. I think that
and non-intervention abroad.
Yeah, that I think that he really understands. He is, if he's a student of anything, I don't think he's a student of politics, but he's a student of mass media and appealing to people's
He knew where
wants.
People were.
Yeah, where they were, what they wanted.
How to touch people who were upset, angry. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that
feeling weakened.
He's brilliant at that, and understanding catchphrases, how to control a narrative, how to dominate the media. He realizes that most of his messaging is about getting eyeballs, and I have never had a president where the topic of conversation or the front page of the paper almost every day is about something the president said or tweeted the day before.
Yeah, and so, John, when I mentioned 4 issues here, because there are 2 ways that conservatives in the Republican Party are upset with Trump.
Mm-hmm.
Even though Trump has delivered for them, more right-wing judges on religious issues and constitutional issues than anyone could have ever delivered.
Yeah,
which I think is not his real belief, but sort of was the pact he made to get elected.
We were talking right before the show with your sound engineer,
station manager, who's a pro-Trump guy.
And one of the things that you have to give the Republicans credit for is finding qualified attorneys at a law school and shaping them and molding them to be fit for the federal bench.
I'll give you that. The Federal Society, the Supreme Court justices we've named, Gorsuch and Kavanaugh, are very serious scholars.
Yes.
Some of the people on the lower benches have zero experience in a courtroom and have like way out there wacko Ku Klux Klan positions on stuff. Like even some of the Republicans are nervous supporting those guys.
I'm going to reserve comment because I may appear in front of one of the judges that you're talking
that's
about.
a good point, John Cirillo, because you're an attorney. So, John, I mentioned 4 issues that are examples of how longtime Connecticut Republicans like yourself, who consider themselves conservatives, have different views from sort of the modern Tea Party wing of the party and Donald Trump. I talked about trade.
Right.
I talked about immigration. I talked about environmentalism. What was the 4th one I mentioned?
Well, let's take them one at a time.
But I'm going to say, before we take them one at a time,
sure.
There's a second way that a lot of conservatives have broken with Trump in the Republican Party. They say that actually, on balance, even if we disagree with him there, foreign intervention, even if we disagree with him there, our more fundamental difference is the character and conduct. So the Weekly Standard, which was my favorite magazine, which just went out of business, they were a never Trump publication. And their argument was that if we meant it all those years with Clinton, where we said character counts, honesty counts, Donald Trump is such an outlier and an outlaw in the way he has used the office to make money in a kleptocracy, the way he conducts himself by really vicious, profane, personal attacks in politics, the way he lies very regularly about everything, beginning with the size of this, his inauguration to last night when he's talking about, leaving out fentanyl, when he's talking about why people die in heroin and heavy. But in any case, so that's 2 different sets of objections. I named issues that I believe, if I'm not mistaken, traditional Connecticut Republican conservatives like yourself had always championed and he's moved away from. But on the second set, it's a different kind of concern. Which is yours, or both?
I think a little bit of both. I mean, with regard to the morality piece of it, I think that morality is community standards. And when you elect somebody, I mean, we knew who Donald Trump was, in October.
Like, were you able to vote for him after he had the statement about grabbing women by the P blank blank? Or now could you vote for someone who illegally used campaign money to stop a what was she, a pornographic actress from speaking about her
running
affair?
Running for office, campaign finance and the laws around campaign funds is very, very difficult to navigate, and so I don't think that it's right. I mean, I think that morally having an affair when you're married with a porn star and then paying, that is immoral. Whether it breaks the law or not, I don't think
Michael Cohen has testified that it broke the law.
Right,
that was specifically to use campaign money and hide that you were doing that to shut somebody up to win an election.
But I don't even think we have to get to the question of whether it's legal or not. Morality. There's the argument can be made that he's immoral. The problem is that morality is determined by social norms and customs. And if everybody kind of knew who he was on the day of the election, then maybe the moral compass of the country has shifted.
Right. So is that one of the reasons you're uncomfortable calling yourself a Republican, that he got elected that way? I mean, that's part of the Weekly Standard argument. Their argument is that Democrats are incredible hypocrites, which, by the way, I agree with them, because of the excuses made for Bill Clinton when not only he lied about sex, but Bill Clinton used state power as a governor to rape women. I mean, that's intense.
Yeah.
And then you had his wife, who was a leading feminist, quote unquote, leading the charge to destroy any woman who comes forward. I mean, that's really heavy, disgusting misuse of power, and lying about sex under oath. And the Democrats all said at the time, well, that doesn't matter because what matters is the policies helping women. So the Weekly Standard argument was, if we thought that was wrong, how could it be okay with Trump?
And see, the problem with the Weekly Standard in today's society is they had moral convictions and they stuck to them, or and I think that we're kind of in an etch-a-sketch world in Republican Party where when we don't like a rule that we live by and a set of principles that have worked for us for years or defined us, we just turn it over and shake it and make up some new ones. And that's when you talk about trade, I mean, one of the things that drew me to a Republican Party was the rationality with regard to free trade and market forces working and things along those lines. And they've abandoned that. The Trump administration has abandoned that. And I feel like a lot of times they're doing trade deals based on payback, or the fact that this is to get back at the Obama administration or things along those lines. I mean, we've pulled out of all of these trade deals. NAFTA was the only one where there was a significant reinstitution of something that took its place. But when you talk about TPP, sure, that you pull out of that, but then what replaces it? Now, okay, well, we're going to have individual deals with each country. Well, how are we doing that with China right now? One of the things that I find incredibly frustrating is he talks about how he's punishing China with tariffs. Well, who pays those tariffs? The American public pays those
his
tariffs.
Voters.
Right. And so, like that, to me, that just seems like a disconnect with macroeconomic.
I guess for me on that realm, because I am a very diehard, despise Donald Trump. It scares me. I think he's a charismatic leader in the mold of fascists and racist. But I'm not as upset as you are about the trade. I have the same view you have that free trade is good. I would have approved the TPP. I thought that was a well-negotiated, imperfect plan. I'm not an expert on that, but Trump did a good job in how he negotiated the new NAFTA.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of smart people on both sides say the China trade issue is very complicated. And China made a bunch of concessions yesterday. And I think you and I would agree that it's better to operate as part of an alliance to pressure China rather than going alone the way Trump does. So we would disagree with his tactics. But I think that, there is no real left-right divide on the China trade issue. It's just different views on the best way to counteract what is just a real power play on both economies of trying to be supreme in the world, and a lot of legitimate allegations of both sides, including China stealing intellectual property and using its market domination in unfair ways. So the stuff that really upsets me about Trump is more like when white people shoot up schools, his panel's big solution in the Parkland Commission is to stop black kids from being kept in school rather than kicked out. Or, after the Charlottesville rally and doing the winks and nods to encourage white supremacists and leading to an increase in hate crimes and violence. It's the misusing the government, the power of presidency to make money for himself and the hush money. That's the stuff that is, and some of the right-wing fundamental evangelical stuff.
I think that if you have issues with Trump, it's like going to one of those, Chinese buffets. There are tons of options that you can use to despise him.
But I'm concerned that critics of Trump, because we're so upset about what he's doing, don't distinguish between what the real problem is and not. For instance, on Syria and Afghanistan, a lot of people feel that, which legitimate argument, that he didn't handle that the best way, the way he rolled out that argument.
Mm-hmm.
But there are a lot of people on left and right, including me, who believe that Donald Trump is the first person in power to recognize the need to end these forever wars that don't accomplish our goals, and that he's more right than the generals who abandoned him.
Right. And I think that we love simple answers, and these are very complex problems, and sometimes he provides a very simple answer to a complex problem, but it's in the right direction. Other times
it's in the wrong direction.
It's in the wrong direction, and
in very dangerous ways.
Yeah, and I mean the issues that I have, and it's because of my training and my background, and it's the constitutional crisis type situations where there is something like one of the first things that he rolled out was the situation with
Mueller.
The certain countries that were majority Muslim countries. I'm going to stop
travel
all
ban. And that his alliances are all with these dictators who are slaughtering their own people without rights.
Now you're pulling me over to another area. What I'm saying is constitutionally, the First Amendment,
we're not going to based on religious belief.
Yeah, you can't exactly. And so for him not to have that kind of an understanding, that troubled me. calling federal judges, oh, that's an Obama era judge, so it doesn't count.
And
or
a guy who was
something.
Latino. Remember, he was going after him.
And not understanding, the balance of powers. I mean, I think that, and that's one of the things I always thought a business leader in federal government, as a president would be somebody who was stellar. I supported Ross Perot when he ran, and there's certain people that I thought would really be Stefanowski here in Connecticut.
I thought he might have been able to run the state pretty well too if he had a Democratic legislature to counterbalance his stuff.
And the thing is that these people who are CEO types aren't used to running businesses in a collaborative way, and with the three equal branches of government, you have to do that. Now, I feel like the Republican Congress for these past 2 years has really not given any kind of pushback to the president with regard to his agenda.
They're wimps. They're scared of electoral backlash.
Yeah, and they're also following what the country.
30% of the country, but forms the base in primaries.
Right. And primaries are crazy vehicles. I mean, they really are. And, I mean, look at here in Connecticut, just bringing it back here. I think that Boughton out of Danbury was probably the best qualified candidate to beat Ned Lamont, and had great position points. And, there were things that I didn't like about him and the way he runs the city and things like that. But the primary process kind of got hijacked, and we ended up getting somebody who didn't have that strong position against Ned Lamont. And
so some people argue that's the reason both parties would benefit from ranked choice voting, where you get to vote in order for all the people. Maine's doing it now. Some other cities have done it. Where you go in order of all the people you like, so that if you wanted Bob Stefanowski first, you could put Mark Boughton second, so that you don't vote. You don't have to always vote for the lesser of evils, and it's not winner take all, but then the strongest general election candidate comes out of the process.
Running elections here in New Haven, I think
Could you imagine the nightmare if you had to tally that? You guys had hard enough time when there were two candidates and trying to tell us 3 days later who got how many votes. That's funny, John.
Really, I mean,
that's how we met. Yeah,
it's higher math. It's not really, So I think that maybe just having primaries be nonpartisan.
That's what Lowell Weicker, when he was a Republican, wanted the party to do.
I mean, I think that would be the wise way to go. And then in New Haven, it wouldn't matter so much.
Independents could vote.
Yeah, because I think that what we're getting is more and more siloed offices based on demographics. So if you're a Democrat in North Haven, where my mother-in-law is from, the chances of you holding a position of power there is just very difficult. In New Haven, if you're a Republican, same thing.
Better chance of winning lotto.
Right. So why do you? So the primary is the real election at that point.
Yeah.
And you're disenfranchised.
Although that's changing in New Haven. I feel like in New Haven now, for citywide offices, not Alder, we have these two-step elections. At least 2013, last time it was contested, where a lot of Democrats run. But then the candidates also sign up, some of them, to run in the general election as an independent when there are 15,000 more voters who are unaffiliated registrants. And then there's sort of the round with the two finalists.
Right. But I mean, but the thing that they run up against in the general election is the candidate that I like to call Rose B, which is actually Roe B, and that's the Democratic line. And as people are coming into the polling place, the
Roe B is the Democratic line? I thought the governor election sets, which is Roe A for the next 4 years.
The time I was running, when I was running, it was Roe B. So vote Roe B.
Yeah.
So it was the way it goes, and that's that's kind of the way a lot of these elections are decided.
And we're talking about the way elections are decided and what it's like to call yourself a Republican in the age of Trump. With a true blue conservative Republican from New Haven, John Cirillo, an attorney and a civic leader, both in his neighborhood in Morris Cove, whether it's work doing Halloween parades with the kids, or whether it's civic leadership in serving on city boards and commissions and moderating elections, or being a private attorney. John Cirillo, and a candidate, has been in the whole mix. So, John, what about this wall? How are you feeling as a Republican when you're watching this government shutdown?
I feel like it's like watching my two children argue over something that is very insignificant. You know, I'll ask them to clean the house, and all of a sudden they're arguing because one person grabbed the vacuum cleaner and the other one wants the vacuum cleaner, right? And it has nothing to do with cleaning the house. It's just a side show about, nonsense that eats up time so they don't have to clean the house. The government needs to clean the house with regard to immigration. And Trump tried to simplify this issue by talking about this wall from the very get-go. And now that the Democrats have taken control of the House, they're exerting their power as a co-equal branch of government and saying on his, primary, initiative, no, we're not going to do that. And they're arguing about this concrete structure or steel slats when really the issue is how do we deal with the immigration problem which is so multifaceted and complex, but nobody wants to actually address it.
But you're running it down the middle. But even if you accept that even-handed analysis, isn't it true to say that Trump was willing to hold up the whole government to deliver something for his base that no one ever really believed in was real and would cost tens of billions of dollars? And really, like last night, he was making up lies about your average immigrant and the impact they have in this country, and really fueling hate and creating an emergency where he sent soldiers to the border and create this crisis with the families there. That doesn't seem to you like tilted to one side?
No, you know what? I think that this, I was talking about this out there before the show. I am going to stay down the middle on this one. I think that both sides are responsible. They both need to get.
So the Democrats should just say, let's reopen the government, give you $50 billion to build this stupid wall?
Oh, but we're talking about a rounding error from what I understand.
But people on those towns, Republicans who voted for Trump, say there is no crisis, there is no problem, we don't need this wall.
Right.
So why are you spending any money for that?
Well, I think that what the solution is to, get the wall out of the picture, and either side can do that.
That's the Democratic proposal. Let's put the wall out of the picture, talk about that separately, and keep the government running so people don't die.
Right. Which was a smart position to take.
So why don't you agree with that position?
I think that that's an appropriate position.
So how are you down the middle?
Because both sides could solve this problem very easily, and the it's not such a big issue on either side that it should hold up 800,000 or 800,000 federal employees. I mean, when you're making big decisions, those smaller, insignificant decisions shouldn't block you from doing your job, right? I forgot my key card last week to get into the parking garage. I didn't turn around and go home. I paid for the parking for the day. Yeah, that's $10. Was that right? No, it's an insignificant issue. You're sent there to do a job. But let me get back to what I was saying outside, just for a quick moment. When Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer were in the Oval Office and they were talking to President Trump, there was a bunch of Republicans in Congress who were getting together talking about the shutdown and how to frame it. And one of the things that they were going to do was they were going to call it the Schumer shutdown. Okay? And as they're having this meeting, President Trump said, I'll shut the government down and I'm going to own it, which was so foolish on his part. Who can shut down the government? Who holds the purse strings? Question.
Congress.
Right. So, technically, a president cannot shut down the government, only through his veto power of the bill. But why would he take ownership of such a disaster? And I think that speaks to his ego and his lack of understanding of government, which,
Alex
really hurts
Tarbus writes in, thanks for listening. If only there were more Republicans like John. Goes back and forth between rows A and B. Good questions. Thank you, Alex, for listening. As usual, Joe says, what lies? I don't know if I'm going to the whole thing about whether everyone died from heroin coming over the border around the fentanyl sent from China, whether the average immigrant is actually posing a threat, whether they're, I know the whole
thing. But, I think that he won the election and he was known as being, loose with the truth. All right, I'm putting that very mildly. And I think that by, John Oliver always does this bit where he's like, we got him. We caught him in a lie. And he throws balloons and there's confetti and there's like a marching band. And he goes, oh, he's still in office? Oh, you get numb from it. There's no punch to this anymore. and it's
It's true.
pathetic. But
So where does that leave you as a Republican? How do you deal with this? Do you think of changing parties? Do you think of supporting a contender like Ben Sass or Mitt Romney against Trump? Do you just say I'm going to focus locally, or are you unhappy with what's happening locally? Where's that leave you, John?
yeah,
Cirillo?
so a lot of people ask me this question. They're like, you're so far middle to the left of where the country is, and I am in a large sense. I
Which
feel
is amazing, Ronald Reagan, because when I came of age, Ronald Reagan was the furthest right. He started his campaign in Philadelphia, Mississippi, basically telling the people who murdered civil rights workers, I'm your campaign back. David Duke did endorse him, too. He's now seen as the moderate.
Right. Well, what about Nixon, right? The
Nixon looks like a
EPA.
flaming liberal.
I know.
EPA, universal minimum income,
Yeah, right. I mean, like,
affirmative action.
so you're talking. Yeah, we're talking about how the things are changing, the spectrum's changing, and all that stuff. But for me personally, this is the way I look at it. I think that democracy works best when you have different voices that are coming to the table and expressing views. Number one, I think that I voted for both Democrats and I voted for Republicans. I think that in the last governor's election, I'll tell you, I voted for Bob Stefanowski. I met both candidates, and I thought that we needed a change, and that was what needed to happen. And it was based on rationality and an understanding of how the government works, and that's kind of what drives me. What's rational? What's the belief? And let's try and limit government to the extent we can to not interfere with people's daily lives.
Some people like David Brooks have called for a third party that they call the middle. Is that where you are?
See, third parties are always doomed. What the third party does is it gives a benefit to the party least aligned with you.
Because we don't have a parliamentary system.
Right.
So what are you going to do next, John Cirillo? Are you going to push to change the Republican Party back to where you were? Or is it a lost cause? Do you just get involved in independent politics? What do you do? Are you still a Republican Party person?
I've backed out of a lot of politics in a lot of ways. And I'm trying to go to a more neutral place. I have my personal beliefs, and I'll advocate for certain things, but I don't think I'm going to run for office again.
And is it because of Trump and where the party's gone?
I think that the collateral effects of that. I mean, I don't think that anybody will listen to what I have to say. I mean, look at the last Connecticut election. We had a very unpopular governor. We had a state that was in crisis with regard to its fiscal, situation, and people moved away from the out party to elect more Democrats and a Democratic governor.
Would you agree with me that the only reason that happened was because people are so mad at Donald Trump in Connecticut?
Exactly.
I don't see how the Republicans lost that election. Now, I'm a journalist, so I predict everything wrong. I thought the Republicans were going to win at least one House legislature and the governor's office.
Yeah, one or the other.
Instead, the Democrats come out with a supermajority almost in both houses and a sweep of all the constitutional offices, and their biggest win in a lifetime, which they celebrated by firing the state party chair who engineered it. Which
but remember the saying, all politics is local? I don't think that exists anymore.
Yeah. So you're going to say you're no longer, but are you still going to be registered as a Republican?
Yeah.
Why?
Because it gives me a voice that people want to hear. I mean, coming on the show, being able to express myself when they need somebody to be appointed to a commission, I come to the top of the list.
But are you still a Republican if you believe in free trade, if you believe in more open borders with immigration, welcome immigrants with rules, if you believe in a whole set of positions that the Trump wing doesn't, but the Democrats do? Trade agreements. Are you pro-choice?
I am pro-choice. And
My God, John, how in the hell are you calling yourself a Republican at this point?
But actually, yeah, it's I think that it's been established that I was pro-choice because from previous
that again
interviews
used to be a Republican position first.
Right.
Planned Parenthood, the ACLU, these were Republican New England institutions.
Right. And I feel
because that's to do with personal liberty.
Right. And I really feel like these moral wedge issues are less about are not as big as people think they are. I mean, they are big to somebody who it's directly affecting. But with regard to me, personally, if my wife, was pregnant, that's a personal decision that we have. But as a policy, I'm not going to dictate to other people what they can't do.
So, but that comes in with a limited government view,
Right. That's
more on
kind
the
of where it is.
libertarian side.
Yeah.
So,
And-
what makes you Republican? Limited government, meaning you're probably against. You were for Stefanowski. I mean, you're for. It sounds like you're opposed to the level of taxation.
Yeah. I mean, with regard to, like, I'm going back and forth between what the state issues are and the federalist state issues are. I believe that we need to have responsible government. I think that there are talking about like an Ayn Rand, very rationally based government that's minimal.
Are you also for environmental protection more? Would you have limits? Would you be concerned about global change?
Well, I think
change. Do you think that we're going through it and that we need to limit coal?
Yeah, because I mean, like the way I look at, I mean, now I don't know enough about the Paris climate to weigh in on that one way or the other. But with regard to climate change, I've seen it in my lifetime happening, and if we're the rational thing to do is to try and build systems in place to where we're the world leader on this issue.
So you'd be for cutting down on carbon emissions rather than easing regulations on coal and changing the way we define mercury poisoning in the calculus to remove human health.
Right. Because I mean, like, and that to me is just a rational, a rule with a rational basis.
So the way you're doing it is you're not going to run for office anymore. But you are going to remain a Republican so that you can still speak as an alternative that comes from a perspective of limited government, but pro-conservation, pro-choice, pro-individual liberty, pro-environmental pacts and trade pacts.
Yeah, and pro-business. Like one of the things that I think lacks in the New Haven debate is, somebody with a strong pro-business agenda that can kind of stand.
How does that play out?
Well, like... right now, the Hotel Duncan is receiving...
Did you read the story this morning?
I did
in the
not.
Independent. So what happened is that the guy who's the Hotel Duncan, small hotel, was SRO, single room occupancy, partly, got bought by someone who's from a national chain that does these boutique hotels with a theme, university themes, put a lot of money into it to make it an upscale hotel small. And usually those are not unionized. And in New Haven, because the hotel union, which also the Yale union controls politics, they were getting held up unless they would agree to a union. But the weird thing that happened was it turns out, he told us on the record last night, he agreed to the union, neutrality agreement, and then they stopped taking his calls. There is no neutrality agreement.
I missed
he
the
said,
last
okay,
part.
they had him cry uncle. City Hall said, if you want to build in New Haven, you have to agree to a union through neutrality agreement. So he threw his arms, said, okay, we'll do it.
Yeah.
But then he told the union, okay, we'll do it. Then they stopped answering his calls. There's no neutrality agreement.
Okay. But what I'm saying is that kind of strong arm tactics with regard to a good business that can come downtown and create
jobs. And that's happening with every
jobs.
hotel. They tried to stop the Pirelli building from getting approval to be
and
a hotel.
And who does that benefit? I mean, granted, the union, it benefits the unions, but does it benefit the residents of the city of New Haven?
So the argument from Tony Harp
like
and the union is that it does. Who does it benefit when you bring in businesses that create jobs you can't live on? So they're arguing is if we want jobs in New Haven, but we want them to be unionized so that you can afford to live here and work.
But that's taking one little aspect of it and throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
Right. So their argument is that what's the point of bringing in jobs?
And you want to know what the point
it?
is? We get a higher tax base, so it relieves the property tax on the other individuals who are contributing to the tax base. It does create jobs. So
okay. So if you can't live on the jobs, it's not a given that if they come in without a union, it won't be a livable wage. But there's a much better chance that it'll be a livable wage with good benefits if you have a union.
Absolutely.
And in fact, some hotel people have told New Haven, well, we can't afford to come here because we'd like to pay the living wage, but our competitors in the suburbs don't. But then the Omni Hotel has had a union for decades, and they're in business.
And they're the only game in town when you want a hotel of that size that has the facilities that it does. But if you put but I think that that you were asking for an example. I mean, I think that's an example.
That's a good example. A Republican Party would have a different position.
Exactly.
Anything else to being a Republican being meaningful in New Haven on an issue? You're saying pro-business is the big thing, and pro-business has traditionally meant trade deals.
Yeah.
To have more input. I mean, that's where people like you and me are kind of globalist in a sense, in that we believe that the more trade, as long as it's fair, as long as it's regulated, creates opportunity for everybody. That NAFTA, in fact, help people from dying industries get new kinds of jobs, even if that means like transferring materials from one part of the supply chain to the other across the Mexican border.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that New Haven has its biggest employer is probably never going to leave. So, that I think they treat a lot of other businesses like that.
Alex Tarbus says they're building more hotels and casinos anyway. These should be union jobs.
They should, but you know what? If that's the way you feel, then buy a property and hire a union and compete. That's fine. But to say that to somebody who is willing to do that, no, you can't, and we're not going to make it an actual bold-faced, you're not getting this because you're not unionizing, but going through the town government to kind of put pressures on them and apply levers, that's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
That is wrong. Have them open up and then picket them outside to unionize. That's the way it's supposed to work.
Well, unions sometimes argue that because corporate interests have captured the government, Trump has named so many pro corporate people on the National Labor Relations Board who are union busters, they can't even bring complaints there anymore, that by winning local government offices, the only way they can then have some counterbalance to that power by using the regulatory process. They don't admit this part because it might be illegal.
So you're saying that it's, corporate interests and big government that's controlling New Haven politics and preventing
NLRB, for instance, and I don't know where you stand, and it's not the point, on graduate student teachers at Yale having a union. When Obama was president, they got pretty far with that, and other campuses started having the union. Once Trump named an LRB, they didn't even bother trying to go there anymore.
Elections have consequences,
yeah.
Right? And that's why we have
so that you could argue that so do local elections. So if you want your government to work in a way that uses the regulatory process to promote unionism, that maybe that's okay. Or are you saying that's not always fair and upfront?
Well, like I said, if there's a business in town and you're a member of a union and then you want them to unionize, you petition, you picket, do the pull the levers that are direct to get them to unionize. You don't go to the Board of Zoning Appeals and say that you're not going to give them a variance on something, and you're
going to rewrite all the zoning laws in a legal way. For
by the way, that's not right.
Yeah. And David Sepulveda says, Blue Wave, I think it's 7 exclamation points. He's kind of rubbing the wound in there for you, John.
I'm so glad he didn't use 6.
What about the state Republican Party? Is it too moved in a direction you're not comfortable
I don't
with?
think so.
Can you still elect people like Stuart McKinney, Julie Balaga, Noel Weicker to office as Republicans? I mean, even Weicker left the party 27 years ago.
It's really tough because of the primary process. I mean, I think that there are...
But that means the base of the party has moved. It's moved away from you, John.
Yeah. Well, it's moved.
How about the local New Haven party? How's that doing?
I haven't been as connected with it as I
So
I've
until
been in the past.
until last year, a guy named Jonathan Wharton was running it. And a lot of Democrats are rooting for him because they felt like there needed to be a balance of power in town. And he did it in a way where he recruited young people who had some smarts, a new perspective, and he got people to serve on boards of commission, was really serious about it. Then a new guy took it over who was a crypto Trumpy, who he told his candidates, don't have any interviews with any reporters because that's the liberal media. So he ended up having people run for office that nobody heard about except for the 7 registered Republicans in New Haven. So nobody voted for, and their positions weren't debated, except on the East Shore where the Joshua Van Hosen
I really think that in New Haven you have a lot of people who are they're pro-Trump. There are a lot of pro-Trump people in New Haven.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, in
What's
my neighborhood. I mean, they're not a majority, but in the Republican Party.
I mean, Ned Lamont won his biggest margin of any gubernatorial candidate in at least 5 decades with a 23,000 vote margin. That was 100% because of Trump.
I understand that, but what I'm saying is there are Republicans in New Haven that are pro-Trump.
Yeah.
And you have to...
and independents.
And they're very vocal about it. So having a Republican chair that speaks to them, and what ends up happening is it shrinks the party because people who find Trump offensive, and there are a lot of them out there, say, well, then I don't want to be part of that. And so John Wharton's, philosophy, I think, was a good one, which is be a little bit more active, inclusive, and a voice of reason or a counterpoint to what the Dems are putting forward. It's interesting. You bring up local politics. My son AJ is in Boy Scouts, and we had to go to a public meeting for his citizenship and the community merit badge. And we went to an aldermanic meeting, and we got there early, and the Democratic caucus met before the actual meeting. And of course that was closed. And then we got to the meeting, and everything was voted yes, yes,
That's happened
yes.
every week.
Right.
Last week, John, one of the most hotly debated issues in town was the Civilian Review Board.
Right.
They called a Democratic caucus meeting. The Democratic caucus is all 28 alders who are Democrats,
Right,
and the other 2 who are independents. So all 30 members of the Board of Alders go to a party caucus. So under the laws of the state, right, if you have a government body meeting, that has to be open to the public.
right.
But if you have a party caucus meeting,
Nope,
that doesn't
it's
have
private.
to be. So the same body can meet with the exact same people
Exactly.
and do
With
all
the same
work
agenda
in the
and-
shadows
yeah.
and make the decisions and not let the public know what the debate is or the reasons.
Exactly.
And call it a caucus. How do you deal with? How do we fight back against that?
You become a Republican. I'm saying that you should do that. You're probably an independent because you're a journalist, but that's the thing. If you're frustrated with that system, you have to sign up with another party and make your voice heard. And
But what makes you think the Republicans wouldn't do the same thing? You have a crypto Trumpy town chair who tells Republicans not to even publicly talk about issues.
But the difference is in this town I'm talking about, right?
I'm talking about New Haven's
Yeah, New
Republican
Haven.
Party in the
But-
last election.
But if we get a Republican,
They ran just as secretive in the last election.
running is one thing, but when you're saying governing, if we can get 1 or 2 other party people in that body, then all of a sudden you could have the debate, right? Because you could go to that one person or that other person and say, listen, they're taking care of all this backroom deals, and then you make a record of it, but you can't do that now.
Yeah.
But
So-
my son's takeaway was, he goes, well, why? He goes, the meeting was really boring. It seems like they took care of everything before.
That
And I
happens
said,
at every meeting.
yeah. And that's not right. That's not democracy.
So you're going to remain a Republican, John Cirillo, in the interest of democracy.
That's what I've been
But
saying
you're
all
also
along.
not giving up this kind of pro-business Republican position either. You feel there is a genuine, it's not just being a Republican is not a Democrat.
Right.
You think there is a way still to
Yeah.
define Republican in the age of Trump
Yeah.
that is a genuine alternative to Democratic Party politics.
Right.
I heard exactly 1.5 issues on that. I heard transparent government, and I heard pro-business policies with labor. Any other examples?
I think that personal liberty and personal freedom, and I think that the Democrats have kind of co-opted that as their issue, but really limiting the size of government so that people are not.
So would you spend less than New Haven's budget? Like, how would you deal with our structural deficit?
I would put more money into economic development with.
So then you would have to raise taxes.
Well, no, it's a matter of priorities. I don't know the whole budget.
But what I mean, what the city says is because we have a revenue crisis, because they call it a revenue crisis because 54% of property can't be taxed because
Right.
state rules. So they say we have no choice. So they went and borrowed $160 million long term to pay operating costs in the last year, which was a dicey thing to do. It led hard for the bankruptcy. And they raised taxes. And their argument is we can't cut government because we're at the bare bones.
But a lot of times, economic development issues like the tourism authorities and things like that, they have statistics for whatever dollar that you spend.
Right,
in
they
that.
have those bogus studies.
Bogus. It
You
depends.
pay the marketing company to say it's at $8. It produces $8 for every dollar.
Are you saying that there are lies, damn
Yes.
lies, and
Yeah.
statistics?
But you have a genuine there is a genuine debate about whether New Haven should stop doing some things in local government that it would like to because it can't afford to.
Right.
The other debate is you just find new ways for revenue because we need to meet basic needs and grow.
Right.
Is the Republican position that we need to shrink the size of local government?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts about how? Because the only example you gave was how to grow it.
Right. So cutting government, I think that we have to look at what the essential services are and then look at what, are you asking me to name a department?
Or a function.
you know-
What's something government does that it maybe shouldn't be doing anymore? Should it not, take care of the parks? Should it not have as many cops? Should it have not as many fire stations?
Maybe it has too many high schools.
Mm-hmm.
My son is at Sound School. It's a great school. The number of principals that are employed by the state,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that John DeStefano did a great job of building up New Haven as a great place to
Then the
educate your
reimbursements
kids.
run out in the magnet schools at least.
Yeah,
gotta
and
keep up those
you
buildings.
you have to look at the efficacy of all that.
All right.
So.
Well, the efficacy of having John Cirillo on Dateline New Haven, I think it's great. I love having you on the radio.
Well, thank you.
I think our listeners, thanks for the comments from people. You are always invited, John Cirillo, to come on WNHH-FM and give us the Republican perspective in New Haven.
Thanks so much.
And thanks, everyone, for listening. We're going to take it out with the Afro-Semitic Experience performing I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free from the group CD, A Plea for Peace. Now, we know what it's like to be free. We just got to remember to book our flight. Fly free with us all day and all night long at WNHH New Haven's home for community radio.